Hello, I'm Gautham Pallapa, and you're watching the Cloud Therapist channel.
Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. I'm Richard Simon. This talk is going to be a panel discussion all about platform engineering. I'm very pleased to say that I have some great guests on the talk with me today. I will ask them all to introduce themselves. Sergiu, would you mind introducing yourself first, please?
No, thank you, Richard. You already know my first name, Sergiu. Petean is the second. I'm originally from Romania. I'm like living the European dream. I lived already in Vienna, Barcelona, and now Munich, and who knows what's my next destination. I'm mainly involved in the IT space for more than 20 years. Lately, I took the job of DevOps. Lately, mean like in the last 10 years, I was focusing mainly on DevOps. I was lucky enough to be part of the journey early on, back when Kubernetes was not existing and there was not even a term around DevOps. There was a lot of confusion about that. At least this didn't change too much. No, there's still a lot of confusion between DevOps, and hopefully today we can at least clarify some of the differences. I'm very passionate about technology, decision making, AI lately. I took a new job around generative AI. And I'm also a member of Cloud Native Foundation. I'm part of the technical advisory board, and I'm waiting forward to bring my contribution to our discussion today.
Fantastic, excellent. Thank you for that. Gautham, if I can ask you to be next, please.
Sure. Gautham Pallapa. I'm a global CIO and executive advisor at VMware, where I focus on helping organizations transform, especially with technology. I've always been passionate about using technology and helping organizations transform with empathy, and that's why platform engineering, DevOps, developer productivity, operator efficiency are all really cool things and things that I'm very passionate about. I've been in the industry for over 15 years, and I grew up through the ranks. I started with development, so it's very passionate for me to make sure that we are able to produce value as quickly as possible and allow systems to do much more mundane things.
Fantastic, thank you for that. And Mark, if you can do an intro, please.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Mark Peters, broadcasting out of San Antonio, Texas. I'm currently working as a director for engineering ops at Braingu. Braingu is a platform delivery company, which makes it kind of specific to this discussion today, making sure that we get all the day two support and end-to-end integration right to help with the DevX. I did 22 years in the Air Force, working on everything from fighters to drones to satellites, the U.S. Air Force. Originally focused on cybersecurity. I've done various things for that. I wrote a book called Cashing In on Cyber Power. Not as good as Gotham's book on emotional intelligence, but you know, we got to do something, right? I really like DevOps, and ambassador for the DevOps Institute. Love getting together and talking about tech and IT and the different ways that people and technology interact together to get us all to great success in the future.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, I mean, yes, not only are we, I think, all geographically dispersed, but we all have different backgrounds as well. So we have enterprise, software, vendor space, and these sort of services. And we're all doing different things. So we've got authors, PhDs, global heads, advisory board members, and so on. So I think it's going to be fantastic. So thank you all for the intro. Okay, so let's kind of just dive a little bit into sort of an intro into platform engineering for those who kind of probably maybe not familiar with the with the term and things like that. So maybe Sergiu, if I can kind of start with you, what does platform engineering mean to you?
Well, it's an evolution. I would say I would define it as DevOps done right. If you embarked on a journey some years ago and then you do all the right decisions and you build the internal capabilities, and then you have to serve a certain amount of developers, and then you go to different stakeholders. I would say it's inevitable that all those decisions, ideally most of them good decisions, will lead towards a platform engineering.
All right, fantastic. And Gautham, over to you, please.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Sergio said. Great point. I will also say that, yes, I agree that it is an evolution, right? It's DevOps done right. Like, I think there is a good consensus around the world that platform engineering is that next step of evolution. I would also say it's a discipline that involves designing and building tool chains and workflows that enable that self-service capabilities for software engineering orgs in this cloud native era. So the way I like to think of it is it's called, I like to call it mise en place in software engineering. So mise en place is a French term that means everything in its place, and it refers to the practice of preparing, organizing, chopping everything, and keeping all the ingredients and tools necessary for a recipe before the chef comes in to cook. And that's what I look at platform engineering is. It involves preparing, organizing the tools, workflows, anything needed for creating that business value in the software development before starting to build and deploy software applications.
Right. And Mark, yourself?
I mean, they're taking all the good words, right? Between evolution and having the toolkit ready. That's what your platform engineering is. As you move DevOps, we say we want flow, feedback, and improvement. And when we started off, there was no set of tools that somebody could offer that would get us to developing right off the bat, right? That we could start doing our things. My favorite is not a shelf, but I like the wood shop analogy, where you have to go out, and if you have to build a shelf, if you have to do it yourself, you're going to make multiple trips to the hardware store, you're going to watch YouTube, you're going to check on things, and nothing's there. But there's places now that'll sell you the toolbox, they'll put your wood shop together, and all you have to do is make the shelf. And instead of taking 6 months to get to that place of being ready to make the shelf, you can start on day one making the shelf, which is what you want. It lets you focus on your return on investment. It lets you focus on your app development instead of all the stuff to get to the app development at the other end of the process.
Okay, and Mark, just staying with you for a minute, one of the concepts kind of platform engineering seems to introduce is IDP. Can you kind of explain, first of all, what that stands for and kind of what it means briefly?
I wish I could. IDP, identity processes. I got to go back to my security background. Independent developer platform.
Yes,
right,
that's it.
Is what you want, or an integrated developer platform. Going back to what we said, when we started it out, we were all looking for ways to do pipelines, and we were all putting our own pipelines, and you're running through GitLab, and you're finding the YAML, and then you're doing a third-party software integration, and then you're doing something else, and then you set up the environment and found that you don't have the right Zarf package installed, or you don't have the right Kubernetes version for the next thing that you want to do, and you've got to build all those things yourself. What the platform does is let you push a button if the platform's done right, and hey, it starts up a cluster for me that already has the test, that already has the Kubernetes, that potentially uses as part of the platform the cross-plane integration as a layer, right? Where everything that I call automatically goes back to Kubernetes. So now I don't have to have all those different hooks and all those different APIs. And it does all that for me. It really lets the developer sit down and start working on what they want, which is whatever the app is that's going to get you value. Whether it's reselling and doing more stuff, or whether it's making the experience better for another user, it focuses us on that app. It focuses us on that thing, and all those other tests have been done. All those security tests are already in a standard pipeline repo that we grab. And yes, we can make changes because we're developers and we're creative, but there's a standard there that we can move off of, that somebody has said, this is the baseline, this is your golden path to get to the next step.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I did look up, I think my viewers are sort of quite familiar with the fact that I do a lot of research on these things. So I found some interesting sort of quotes around it. Somebody called it was it platform engineering? They called it it's a loaded question. So that was Software Engineering Daily, which I think is an interesting website. But they did also provide a very sort of visual approach of kind of what it looks like, where it fits in, which I always appreciate. So I'll maybe try and include some details of the link for that in the description of the video. Okay, so what are kind of some of are there any standards and frameworks? Are these sort of emerging around sort of platform engineering? Gautham, what's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, so I think it was Gartner that defined open architecture as one of the standards. So it's one of those technology architectures specifications that are public as opposed to some of the proprietary things, right? So it's some of the officially approved standards as well as privately designed architectures and specifications. I'm going to actually start off with what Mark said, because he introduced Kubernetes and the Kubernetes ecosystems, and that is one of the prime examples of the frameworks and open source, where open source software is used to drive platform engineering and also build those internal developer platforms. If you think about the Kubernetes ecosystem overall, and Kubernetes is basically just the container orchestration, but then you have so much of the scaffolding around it. And Sergiu, you can attest to it being part of CNCF that it's crazy. If you are going to pick and choose your tools right now, you are going to have cognitive overload. And by the time you actually pick and choose your pipeline, it probably would be obsolete, because there are much more faster and better projects that have already incubated and started moving in. So that is too much of a complexity that are there. And that's where I really feel that the frameworks around platform engineering, around platform as a product, and internal developer platforms really solidifies those frameworks that we have. And I think as we go into the conversation, I'll talk a little bit more about it. I don't want to start off so early on talking about Pivotal Cloud Foundry or VMware Tanzu and all those things, which are actually platforms. And I'm actually privileged to have worked with both of those things. But there are so many frameworks, and I think you have other things like CMOS and some of the other frameworks that are in the DoD blessed space that provide that rigor around platform engineering. And Mark, I think you have much more insight into those frameworks, because I'm more on the commercial side.
Right. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, I think there's, I pick up on the point that, we need some kind of sort of framework and cohesivity around these things. And there is, if anybody's ever looked at the CNCF landscape, you'll see what I mean about the number of those. And I think that's what you were, that's what you were sort of leading to. Yes, Mark.
I'd point out one of the great books, Team Topologies by Pace and Skelton, talks about having the thinnest viable platform, right? And the thinnest viable thing that lets you do the other stuff you want to do. And that's just as important as well, that the platform shouldn't be structuring your creation or structuring your art, but it should provide you all the tools that you can develop that art.
Yeah, I will. So that's interesting. You bring Matt Skelton's. I mean, that book is amazing. First of all, I would definitely plug that again. But it's interesting that a lot of people are approaching platform engineering as a monolithic thing. Like, they are building it in such a tightly coupled way, when the goal that they're trying to accomplish is to make it loosely coupled. It's kind of a very interesting view of building something that is so rigorous, that tries to encompass and accommodate everything, when what they're striving for is actually having it very loosely coupled. And that's where I think that minimum viable product, or the minimum business increment is what I like to call it, is the basic minimum required, the basic toolchain required to generate value. That's what we need to start with.
Indeed. So Sergiu, just turning to you for a minute, what's kind of some of the, is there like a sort of a software solution or a platform that helps you to put all of these sort of frameworks into action? Or are you really, almost hand knitting everything yourself? What's your kind of take on that?
Depends. I feel like there is a risk.
That's a typical IT answer, isn't it?
Of course. It's not so simple. And business people want simple answers. It's not so simple. It's more complex. Right? And I feel that there is a risk here, because we decouple DevOps from platform engineering, mainly because people look for a shortcut. They feel like they can recover maybe the lost time in not moving towards cloud native, let's say digital transformation. And they can just speed up and skip the DevOps culture change, which is a culture at the end of the day. It's not just tools and the delivery, but it's much more than that. And you don't have one single stakeholders, engineers, but you have the whole stakeholders of the whole company. If you have a digital company, you need to serve everybody, right? You need to serve security, compliance, developers, QA. So you have a bunch of stakeholders that have to be embracing the cloud native way of doing stuff, and they have to probably be part of the representing the platform engineering, right? So the risk here is that we or in the industry simplifies this journey and say you don't need to go to the DevOps change, right? You just take a platform engineering, and if you put an IDP on top of that, you're good to go. Your maturity level on cloud native, it's on top. You just save 10 years of your life in doing transformation, cultural change, teams topologies, different setups. No, we don't need to go through all that. I'm sure, the platform engineering is simplifying the journey, but they do not exclude each other, and doesn't mean that once you're on platform engineering, your journey is over, right? And as we mentioned, this is an ongoing process. It has to be decoupled. There are so many pieces which make a good platform engineering, and there's no way you can't treat it as a monolith, right? It should be a single experience, of course, and this is where cloud native comes and gives you a lot of qualities around every single tool. You can decouple them. You look at the quality of those. You measure one against the other one. So options you have, but you need the vision, and you need probably the feedback from all the other stakeholders in order to drive the platform engineering roadmap in the right direction.
Right. And just staying with you for a minute, in terms of the principles, have we kind of mentioned all the principles, or is there other specific principles that platform engineers try to kind of adhere to or actually introduce into the development sort of process?
I would say that the holistic view is the most important one. You have to treat suddenly all the tools in the cloud native landscape. When you look at that, you have to, the ones that you actively use have to be treated holistically. You cannot think about one single component in isolation, and you cannot have a team that works in isolation either. So again, we go to the team topologies. You need to have a team that drives the platform engineering with a holistic mindset, because if you tune something, if you change something, if you evolve something, that has to evolve together with all the other parts, and the systemic qualities around these integrations are the ones that bring the quality in the platform engineering. And it's complicated, it's tricky, especially when we look at the cognitive load behind the platform engineers, or the DevOps. It's quite hard to keep that at the same level while everything is moving so fast.
Right. Okay. So let's move on to kind of the engagement of platform engineering in the sort of in the real world. What are some of the so I can ask this for Mark first. What are some of the sort of problems that platform engineering is really trying to solve, Mark?
So the biggest problem is you want to get developers developing first, right? If you want to build your own platform, if you want to start, our rough numbers say it's going to take you 18 to 24 months to build an effective platform that people can develop on. And it's going to be another team of 10 to 20 engineers who just support that platform all the time. If we go back to the cooking example, Gautham, the platform engineering gives you the chance to do multiple things, right? And go in multiple frameworks. We have our starter kitchen where you can look at the pipelines and build anything you want. And you can have your lemon meringue pie and you can put ketchup on it and you can see if it works and you can test all the various integrations and pieces. And then you go to the other production cluster that's still running off of that platform that says, no, now you're restricted to these pipelines. That's actually going to a customer. We're not going to let you do those type of things to it, right? So that you can have both the open space to freely develop, and you can have the constructed space that says, no, when we get to here, you have to be a little bit more detailed. But the platform supports both of those evenly through the same way, through that same knowledge base to drive you forward. And that really enables success. It gets everybody talking in the same lanes and talking in the same way, and using kind of that common framework, that common lexicon that they have in the DevOps, so that they can try their flow and they can get their feedback quickly and they can move on without having to go back and develop I've got to set up my own GitLab environment. I've got to set up a Mattermost channel so that I can talk to it. And now I've got to call in a different Kubernetes repo. And now, maybe I'm using ML and I need the NumPy and the pandas, but everybody's using different versions and, things like that people don't think about. Or from security, even adding in, well, our pipeline automatically produces the SBOM for you when you send your software forward, right? And that the developer didn't even think about that, but it's part of the pipeline they choose from their repo list.
Right. Fantastic. And Gautham, if I can just turn to you in terms of the value that platform engineering brings to to existing practices like DevOps. Somebody's been doing DevOps, they've got a pipeline, they've got sort of their own methodology. What is kind of the benefits that and the value that platform engineering is bringing to that?
Yeah, so this is where I get super excited, because this is where platform engineering really shines, right? So the goal of platform engineering, in my mind, is to abstract complexity, and it is to elevate human quality of life. That's truly what platform engineering is doing if you take it at a 30,000-foot level. So we've all talked about the amount of complexity that are currently there in the tooling, in the focusing, living in YAML hell, trying to spin up infrastructure as code, and then understanding that you probably did a typo somewhere and that it just scolds you because it did it and you're unable to troubleshoot. Like, every developer has almost spent most of their time in either YAML hell or integrating tool chains together and so on. So what platform engineering does is it abstracts that complexity and it allows people to focus on their high value activities. So for developers, as Mark pointed out, it is developing code. So the more time they're spending creating those customer-centric features that are necessary for delivering business value and ultimately revenue for the company, the more valuable they are. And so we have this concept of inner loop and outer loop. So the inner loop is all about the developers. It is about using IDPs and the tool chains so that they can quickly iterate, do those experimentations, test it, make sure that it's viable enough to move down the chain. And then it goes into the outer loop, which is all about platforms, hardening, scalability, SBOMs, and making sure that it runs in production. And that's where I think platform engineering really creates that benefit. It brings that discipline, the repeatability, and the idempotency within the inner loop that is for developers. And then it brings that all the abilities that are required for the platform and make it easier so that the platform operators are not fighting with the platform and doing heroic things, but they have a much more sustained and repeatable way and a much more humane way of managing the platforms. I think that's the power of platform engineering, is it allows people to focus on their high value activities and empowers the technology to do the mundane tasks.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of just picked up on the standard benefits, of sort of having a consistent infrastructure, having a more scalable and reliable sort of software process, if you like, for developing software, potential security improvements, potential, faster delivery of features and things like that, and cost control, which I think is really, I think whatever you're doing, you have to tie it into kind of that overall sort of cost management or FinOps sort of approach that you have as well. So those were kind of some of the other benefits that I sort of picked up on. Okay, so I think one question I wanted to ask was, is platform engineering going to replace DevOps with things like IDP? But Pluralsight, I picked up an article from Pluralsight, which was really good. And it actually said it's an evolution, not a DevOps replacement. So Sergio, first of all, do you agree with that?
With the fact that it's an evolution, totally. Totally. It's obvious for practitioners from the field. We are still in the business of influencing people and change mindsets about how to run stuff in an efficient way. And DevOps is probably the right philosophy in the cloud age to do that. So it's mainly about educating yourself, educating the others, and building a platform for conversation. So I would say platform engineering is nothing else but a platform for having the right conversation between all the stakeholders. And again, I want to stress out that this doesn't belong to DevOps. It's not a one-to-one dedicated solution built for developers, right? The platform engineering needs to serve the whole organization. And this is probably the right place where the common language, the common KPIs, the common numbers have to be defined. And you increase the level of quality that everyone is able to produce while you do that in a simple way. Because you don't produce just code, you produce qualitative code, which means it has qualities around operations. And we go in the SRE field, we're talking about security, we're talking about shifting left now. So all those initiatives fit very well in a platform that serves everybody and makes everyone more efficient. So completely agree with Gautham. It's extremely important that the quality is being addressed and is being really put in the arms of everyone using the platform engineering.
Okay, and Mark, would you kind of go along with that? What are your thoughts in in that sort of area.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think the point is, one of what Sergio was hitting on is that you can have multiple platforms, right? That are the same platform, just running in different instances, running in different clusters or different clouds, but they're all using that same basic to drive us forward. So that when you bring your design to somebody else's kitchen or somebody else's wood shop, you still have all the same tools present and they're all in the same places, right? So that when you go from that one sense to the other, everything is present and you can move forward. I would say platform, the IDPs that are coming out of platform, the standardized platform engineers that are going out there are really the DevOps eating their own dog food finally, right? We've always said if you have to do something twice, you should automate. But for years, we've been doing it individually. Every time we stand up a new company, we stand up a new platform and think, this is the best solution for us. And then we spend those 18 months trying to automate something. And like every other DevOps professional in the world has fought the YAML issues and has fought the GitOps issues and like fought the Kubernetes versions, and they know what they need. And somebody has finally aggregated some of those solutions in platform engineering that, hey, I don't have to solve it. And then once I solve it, I have to automate it, and then I have to check it, and then I have to security check it, and then I have to compliance check it, right? Somebody's already done that for me. So why shouldn't I take advantage of what they've done and continue to develop at the front edge instead of developing all that background and that back shop kind of piece?
Right, and I think that kind of goes into the next section quite nicely, which was kind of a little bit more around sort of platform engineering in the cloud strategy. So kind of within an organization, sort of cloud strategy and so on. So one of the questions I was curious about, and I did have a search on this. I did a bit of research on this, kind of just to see what the feeling was out there. And as you do, obviously, I used ChatGPT to help me with that search. So it did come up with some suggestions, which were quite interesting. And the question I kind of wanted to pose in that sort of strategy space, and as organizations and developers, DevOps engineers, and so on are trying to kind of standardize, is there any perception that platform engineering might kind of pose a bit of a restriction on how developers kind of choose their tools, use their tools, and maybe quite similar to that sort of infrastructure as code aspect of it for DevOps engineers who are kind of building that space? We know that there's kind of automation tools and people choose your Terraforms and Ansibles and whatever out there, for example, or DevOps or developers rather kind of choose whatever IDEs that they want and things like that. So kind of just coming in with platform engineering, is that kind of maybe perceived as or is there any sort of feedback that you've seen as maybe kind of imposing a bit of a restriction on that? Sergio, what's your take on that?
I would say you need restrictions. It cannot be a Wild West. You cannot have thousands of tools. I mean, because every single tool you have has to be hardened, has to be evolved. That's not sustainable. Imagine a small team of 10 people supporting thousands of developers, and then a few hundred maybe business people around. So 10 people for 1,000 people, and every single squad, imagine hundreds of squads developing in their own languages and their own tools, and just bringing new tool sets out of nowhere. That's not maintainable. That's chaos. So you need to have the right level of quality, and that has to be driven by someone that understands, again, holistically the whole space and makes the right choices, but not in isolation. And right. Say a nice saying and an evolution that I'm saying from DevOps to platform engineering, it's the difference between the saying like you build it, you run it. That's how we add it in DevOps. But in platform engineering, we change the tone and we say you build it, you run it, but with our help. Right? It's like we hear you, we collect feedback, we delegate, and we make our engineers contributing back to the platform. It's not ours. The ownership, it's not really belonging to one single team. This is a space where we all have to contribute back, and we have to drive it together. As long as you have this same conversation, this helpful conversation in place, then you can steer it together with everybody, and there is no friction between who's choosing the right tool as long as you have the right arguments. The question is right equipped person has to select a certain tool. No, it's like you cannot ask a developer to ask your to choose your security tool for that. So again, as long as you have a common conversation, I would say the conversation will flow smoothly. If you don't have that, then it's a lot of friction.
Right. I think, Mark, did you want to come in there for a minute?
Oh, I was just agreeing completely, right? The question is, does it prescribe the tools that you use? Yes, absolutely. But so does your organization, so does your budget, so does your current team, so does the current experience of the members on the team. It just provides the, like Sergio said, right? It's the common set of things that we can do together. And if they want to try another tool, you're like, fine, it's your cluster running off the platform. You integrate that tool with your software. And if you like it, maybe we'll consider making it a part of the platform, but you can do all that integration on your own. Here's the basic set of tools that you have. If you're doing something different, great. I hope it works. Let me know what that status is. But meanwhile, my other 10 teams can move forward and I don't have to worry about screwing up everybody else because you've decided that you want to use that version. Hey, are you enjoying this talk? If so, please consider subscribing to the Cloud Therapist channel.
Gautham, what's your take?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think what I'd like to add is, that I don't think there's any kind of restriction, right? Both Sergio and Mark have said there's no real restriction for the tools, the tool sets, the shared libraries, and the modules, and so on. But it's about managing the risk profile and the reusability, the return on investment, right? So the reason why we go to tools and for technology is to make sure that they're reusable, that they're consistent, and they're able to reduce some kind of friction that we have in the workflow. Now, every time we bring a new tool, it's going to add more friction, it's going to add less reusability, and it's going to be harder to justify why the tool is going to exist, especially in an enterprise, because we need to contain that amount. And Sergio said it cannot be the Wild West. I mean, I totally agree. We need to have a certain number, like maybe recommended set of tools that you can potentially use, because yes, there might be some applications that would be different. Of course, your baby is going to be a snowflake. And so you might need something extremely exotic to use, but how can you use it with other things? Like, are you looking for 100% compatibility, or are you trying to get the job done? And this is where that Pareto principle really helps. Like 80%, can you get 80% of the way there? Can you enhance the 80% to maybe 90% consistency with the same tool? If you can, then let's talk about why you actually need this other new whiz-bangy thing and not accommodate it. And I think that dialogue is what is so important in organizations. And that's what actually created that rift between the developers and the operators in the first place. It became an us versus them, because they would say, we need this thing. Oh, I cannot develop anything without having root on all my systems. No, you can. There are ways to do it. You probably need to jump through one or two additional hoops. But let's come to an agreement. Let's have a contract within the organization. I think that is what is necessary, especially when you're going into cloud native space. There is so many ways that you can go down different rabbit holes.
Yeah, and that's why I put it in this sort of strategy, kind of section, because I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about sort of, restrictions. So maybe kind of, as you guys said, I think kind of being more of a prescriptive sort of way of doing things, and not necessarily a sort of a dictatorial way of doing things. And it's certainly probably trying to avoid to be being antagonistic to developers and what have you. So that was kind of the next question of whether it is antagonistic or is it kind of a force for good. I think it's more, that is not necessarily a sort of a question that you potentially can answer directly, but kind of more, we need to kind of maybe educate the field. And it's certainly kind of maybe, I don't know, maybe developers kind of coming into coming into a new job, that that person might expect to use certain tools, and they're kind of used to using tools. That's their experience. And then they come in and they say, oh, you've got to kind of make a choice from these sort of PE platforms that we have for you. And then his libraries and modules that he or she normally would use or something are not there. and then maybe they get a little bit dismayed about kind of, you know, did I take the right job here or not? What's kind of your feeling on that in terms of that sort of educational element? And I'll have this as a sort of an open question to you.
You can start if you guys are okay with it, only because I'm so passionate about this. And I'm passionate about this because I've built platform engineering teams in multiple organizations, and I see this kind of anti-patterns keep coming. But I want to stress upon the fact that, especially after the pandemic, we have all had different kinds of working. So it is remote working or hybrid working or anything. So now the tool chains and technologies are what are creating and driving organizational behavior. I want to start off with that. So when a new person comes and joins the organization, they obviously have a different culture, they have a different background, and they have a different working, way of working that they now have to adopt new things. So there's going to be a lot of friction, at least from a human standpoint. That's going to be your first point of entry to inculcate the new person coming in to understand why we made these particular decisions in the tool chain, or why we put certain guardrails. I think having that open communication and a candid approach would be the first way to start having the conversation around the tools, the ways in which it's being used, and so on. Now, the next thing is it's all about behavior. We are creatures of habit. We tend to do things the best way that we think we can do it. There's going to be a learning curve. It's going to be discomfortful for developers and for operators, anyone within the organization when there is change. The goal is to make sure that there is enough discomfort where people enjoy the amount of learning, and they're not pushed into a panic state where, as you mentioned, Richard, they're going to question whether they took the right job or not. And I want to start off with that from the human aspect of things, not just the technology. Like, we have to embrace it. They are coming from a different culture. It is going to take a little bit of time, but they need to understand why we do things in a particular way.
Okay. Anyone else? Any thoughts on that?
I can go for hours on this one. We don't have that much time, right?
We'll do a separate talk on resistance and onboarding.
No, it's. I mean, we have to take role by role, I would say, because it's having a different impact on everyone. Like, I will start with the DevOps in the first place, or platform engineers, how we want to call them. I still want to call them DevOps because it's much more than just platform engineering. And suddenly the cognitive load that one DevOps has, it's enormous. There's no way you can start fresh, because you had, like, in the past, like not so long time ago, you had two types of DevOps. You had someone coming with 10 years plus experience in software that was passionate about infrastructure and Docker and containers. And then you have infrastructure guys passionate about Kubernetes. So you had very experienced guys building the core teams. And now you have suddenly juniors, DevOps, coming in the space with zero experience on infra, zero experience maybe on software engineering, and have to take so much load. No, it's so much load to cover all the components, and then every single decision you make, it's going to have side effects on so many other parts of the journey. So it's extremely complicated to get it right. And if you put someone in the middle of it and you say you handle it, that's the end of it. Maybe it's changing the whole career. Right, so you have to, and that pressure it can be felt also by the senior DevOps, because now they have to train all the others and have to do it and have time in a digital world. Maybe you don't even never met the other person physically, so you have all the conversation without the personal interaction or the building of that relation that has to happen before that, to get the confidence and the mentorship needed to have. So it's a very challenging job to have, especially if you start fresh in the DevOps. And then we go to the next roles. Now we go in the role of engineers, software engineers. I mean, their role is completely changed. Suddenly, everyone is shifting left everything. You get to worry about security, vulnerabilities. You need to understand that. You have a bunch of tools that you have to work with. And the more you change companies, the more sets you're going to find out about them. So it's insane. And then quality, quality never had to be shifted left, and now it's been shifting left because there is a trend to shift it left. And then we're talking about business concerns. Suddenly, if you have an incident, you have to be able to fix it because your code generate loss for the company. So suddenly you have to do incident management, and incident management comes with problem management, change management, backlog. So there is so much more to be done than you did it in the past. It's not just coding. If you say coding with quality and you bring all the list of qualities, then my God, you're gonna kill yourself. No, it's crazy. So you have to simplify all this.
Yeah.
And this is where platform engineer comes in and say, I'm trying to simplify all that. I'm giving you the right metrics. You don't need to worry about them. Your code already has the right library to have the metrics. You get the right dashboards. You don't need to look at them because you have a runbook and you have an alert that is going to find you. And I'm going to be precise. I'm not wasting the time of all the others. So it is a lot to digest. And there is still room for improvements and simplification. So again, it's going to be a tricky load for everyone here.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So some difference in the culture, need to look at that, kind of try and avoid those sort of anti-patterns. That resistance maybe helps, can be helped with onboarding and things like that as well. I think that's kind of the gist of that. Excellent. Okay. So let's kind of move on to some advice from you guys. I've kind of got you around the table, or virtual table, so to speak. So let's have some advice from you as well. So what are kind of some of your suggestions in people kind of want to get involved in platform engineering, both to kind of learn it first of all, and then maybe start implementing it. So Mark, if I can go to you first, if that's okay.
So it's really a lot of the back end, right? As we've talked about, it's those back engineers and the infrastructure that builds things that let someone else do things to move forward. So it's not a real change in engineering scope or anything. I'm building the set of tools, right? How do I get the tools set up in the best way? The chef still sets up and says, hey, these are the things I need organized. They organize, they come in and check and make sure that all the tools are in place, that all the supplies are in place. Like, I've given you the menu, I've given you the supplies, and like their job is to make sure that those things occur automatically. You set up the automatic deliveries, you make sure the versions are in place. How are you checking those type of things? How are you working, the Kubernetes engineering part, or the Kubernetes skill set is a big piece. Especially with some of the cross-plane things and some of those other types that make that more automatic along the way. Working with the cloud infrastructure, how can I set up and connect multiple clusters is kind of, again, back-end infrastructure engineering more than the other part. And then, of course, they have to be DevOps, so they have to have soft skills and, people focused. They can't just tell the developers, well, that's stupid. Not add things to the new platform, because that kind of puts us in the wrong path. As Gautham laughs at me, right? That was his whole emotional book, was don't tell people they're stupid. Along the way.
Okay.
So I mean, those are some of the advice things, right? Yeah. And look what's out there that you can benefit from.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And Sergio, what's your kind of take on that as well?
Be patient and focus. There is like a feedback loop. If you start fresh, you cannot just compare yourself with the other platform engineer. It's like ages away. But of course you can move fast if you really focus on the components that make sense for you and you feel comfortable, and then you move to the next one. Build on that. And that's very important to get as soon as you can to the global view or the holistic view. But don't hurry up, because if you really focus, then you're going to grow, and then you're going to see the impact of your work. Don't jump to impact. Some juniors try to have an impact immediately, and they compare the impact against, experts in the field for 20 years. So don't rush in. Cognitive load is huge. There is plenty of time to learn, and also choose your organization wisely. There are organizations who are interested in your growth and give you the space to grow, and some organizations that they simply want you to deliver, and that's simply not possible with the impact you have at that point in time.
And Gautham, we mentioned sort of having it as part of your sort of strategy, your cloud strategy. Where would enterprise, kind of let's talk about it as a sort of on an enterprise level, on an organization level, where would they start? How would they start? Whether they're doing necessarily, sort of some of the practices associated with platform engineering or not, what would be kind of some easy starting points for them?
Yeah. So first, I want to add to Sergio's thing, because what he said really resonated with me around that. And I want to say that being patient, especially for people who are coming in, I think that anxiety comes because the way that the developers are measured is on the number of stories that they do, or the number of times that they check in code, or any of these other metrics. I think as an organization, one of the things we want to do is change that around and recognize that learning and running experiments and failing with them is also extremely valuable. So the minute you're starting to do that, that means that you're becoming productive. And I think that's going to be the first thing. And so, Sergio, thank you for bringing that up. From an enterprise perspective, I think the first way that we want to start is to assess the organization's needs. Like, understand what exactly are the bottlenecks or the developer frustrations that you currently have, and do it in a collective way. More often than not, I see in a lot of enterprises, they have this build it and they will come mentality. I mean, like, yeah, sure, you can take Spotify's backstage process and build your own IDP, and then you create your own platform. It'll be like competitive to, say, one of the hyperscalers, and you will think that developers will come. But if you have not actually talked to them and tried to understand what their frustrations are with the existing process, all you've done is you've spent a lot of time and effort in things that you could have actually been doing to improve the lives of people. So surprisingly, for being humans, we are not really good at communication and having a human approach. So get everyone to the table. Everyone who is involved in the value chain or the value stream, bring them in. Let's talk about mapping the value, understanding the friction points, where are the pains that are being there, and then start introducing tools and technologies to remove that manual pain. And before you know it, you are going to have an amazing platform that is going to your organization, rather than just purchase something off the shelf and then shoehorn it into everything and nobody really wants it. And then you have shadow IT coming everywhere. So I think that is going to be the first step, is to just ask people, what exactly are we trying to accomplish and how can we achieve it with speed to value, consistency, resiliency, and security.
Right, excellent. And Mark, just one question for you. Do organizations need to have already been doing DevOps practices in order to kind of start dabbling with platform engineering, or can they kind of really come from that sort of old way of developing things and start immediately with platform engineering?
Well, every organization should be doing DevOps at the start, right? So that's true. That's a given. But unfortunately, I would say platform would even benefit some of those old models just as effectively if you're going from implementing a platform rather than building your own.
Interesting.
Theoretically, like a waterfall type organization, right, would be doing development and they'd be doing it on a set pattern, but they couldn't get their stuff out because they didn't have the right tool set at every step of that waterfall to move it along. So if they had a good platform to start with, they'd theoretically be able to move to development faster. And like Gautham said, focus on that return on investment, right? Focus on that value they actually want, instead of spending the first 18 months of their waterfall structure thinking about how they're going to think about getting ready to build the thing that's going to actually create value. And by the time you get to creating value, you're 24 months outside of that window that you had a 60-day window to get that new app into market, right? Where everybody was going to buy it and use it and move forward.
That's so valuable, Mark.
What?
That's a really valuable point. I think people don't stress enough the fact that if it is not in production and is not being consumed by a customer in some way, regardless of where you are in your maturity level, it is worthless.
Yep.
So that should be what you're striving for, right? And that's where I think your points, I really love the fact that you're saying, don't think it's all the new way of doing things. As long as you're doing it consistently, securely, and you're able to generate the value, that's what it really is important.
And that's what the platform does to you. It lets you get to that value, right? I don't want to, if I want a small focused hyperscaling team that's going to build that Spotify app that millions of users are going to click on a day, if I have to build all the pipelines to get it through the other stuff, to get to the space and build a platform, now I'm months and months and months outside of that, and some other person is going to get there faster or could have competitive things to me, right? I want the developers I hire and the money I spend on my organization to focus on what builds money for my organization. And that's in software development, is developing software, not developing the platform that helps me build software.
Agreed. Excellent. Okay, so it wouldn't be a talk sort of 2023 post sort of generative AI without asking a question about AI. So the final question is, and this is an open one, so anybody can jump in. How do you think AI will change platform engineering?
I'll jump in. I'll say I think it'll help. We see the GitHub Copilot. We see stuff. I've had talks from companies that are like, hey, we'll do the crawler on all your screens, and it'll be like, you've spent 3 hours in Argo. The average developer at your skill set spends 30 minutes in Argo. Can we suggest some videos or some tools that might help you get to the next step? Right? I mean, it is a form of learning when you use a platform that's already there and it's already got the pipelines that are pushing up and say, hey, you've had these pipeline errors. Let us recommend some suggestions for you that might be helpful with what you're doing. It's all kind of intertwined there to get you to the right spot. Or the AI that looks across all the development that's being done and saying, your developers could really use adding this tool to the platform rather than waiting for the developer to come. Maybe this new Kubernetes implementation, maybe cross-plane again would be helpful because they're calling Kubernetes, but they're using 6 different versions to get to the outside apps with Terraform or something else.
I would agree. It's already there, right? I mean, like Mark's mentioned GitHub Copilot, and then the other ways that you can assist. One of the ways that I think generative AI can really help is looking at your code base and then coming up with those templates or patterns that early developers can use, those accelerators. Like it's like the spring.io, right? Start.spring.io had this thing where you could go there and you could select and say, I want these particular things. And then you just download your template or your skeleton framework, and then you just start writing your business logic. I think generative AI is really powerful in looking at your code base and coming up with those reusable components and those accelerators that can easily be used to plug in to your internal developer platforms, and then can be used to enhance and bring that customer value quicker to the market.
Sergiu, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with my peers. I would like to maybe look at this one in phases, because I see different phases with different impacts on platform engineering and engineering in general. Immediately, I would say we can reap some benefits from the fact that you can find information faster. And that goes very well in education. You have lots of engineers trying to consume your platform, and they are your customers. And you have business people that want to consume your platform and your KPIs, and you have compliance people looking during the auditing of different information that has to be translated, has to be found, has to be changed, modified. So this middle layer where you simply negotiate the information, you get the right translation in the right language and the right domain behind it. This is what I see an immediate impact. So you're going to take load from platform engineers. It's going to give them space to be more creative, where they have to be creative, and they're going to take this toil away from them. Then quality, immediately we're going to be able to have, when you do a PR, I can imagine you have some already feedback coming on your PR, and then you might even generate some diagrams between the connection between all the files that you have. So obviously you're going to spend less time in going through a certain PR and do code review, and you're going to be much more precise, and maybe you're going to learn more while you do that in a faster way, because PRs at the end of the day are a way of learning. So you're going to grow more expertise, and you're going to treat PRs as a lesson. Imagine a junior looking at the PR done by a senior, and suddenly has the diagram and the whole explanation in front of its eyes. That's an invaluable lesson that he gets, right? So this is where I believe we're going to immediately get value, not to mention zero-level support. Now you have engineers and business coming for different requests. I need a key, or I need, a secret somewhere, and suddenly you have a zero-level support where he can have an interaction with your documentation, and he gets most of the answers without actually disturbing the platform engineers from their focus. And why not, just in the last resort, they end up with a human, but provide enough context that saves half of the work in understanding the problem. So this is where I believe we have immediate benefits from AI. Next, probably we're going to see AI ops. So we are collecting and producing so much metrics and so much information that has to be digested. And currently we can't do that. So bringing AI ops next to this and have then maybe a way to have Gen AI, having a conversation with your metrics and writing the right queries in PromQL and others. So again, that's another boost that you can have immediately on operation quality that you might generate. And in the future, I'm sure in phase 2, 3, we're going to have much direct impact on the actual engineers. You might have, I don't know, a co-pilot assisting on onboarding and education. You don't need a senior to spend so much time in growing and analyzing your code. But that's for the future.
Fantastic. Okay. I think we can probably go on talking about this, and there's lots more to certainly explore. I think we're kind of pretty much there on the in terms of our time. Yeah, maybe you should have like a round 2 maybe or something like, and kind of carry on for another hour or so. So I just wanted to thank you all. Thank all my guests. You guys have been really fantastic. Really appreciate your time, first of all, and as well as your insights. All the links for a lot of the stuff that we discussed, links for any sort of books and websites and things like that you guys have, any blogs that you've written, things like that. We'll try and include all of that in the description of the video. Wanted to thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel. See you next time.